Hi, I'm James Vowles. I'm the Chief Strategist here for the team, and I'm here to answer your questions about the Brazilian Grand Prix. After the mixed conditions of qualifying, where Lewis did an incredible job putting that car on pole, we went into the race first and third with Valtteri. Valtteri had a great start and got alongside Vettel in the outside of turn 1, taking that second position back. And from then onwards was able to hold both Ferraris behind for a number of laps. But the story of the day was really about tyres and who could keep them in the window the best. And Red Bull were the strongest team in that regard. Verstappen started back in 5th and already got through both Ferraris by the time we got to lap 5 of the race, and by lap 10 had caught up and overtaken Valtteri on track. He then made huge advancements towards Lewis and really brought that gap down very, very quickly to be within around 1.4 seconds of Lewis before we stopped. The race was a one-stop, it was a one-stop for everyone. The medium tyre, very robust and able to take everyone to the end of the race. And from then onwards, the next part of the story was Esteban Verstappen making contact into turn 1, putting Verstappen to a spin, breaking his floor, and Esteban receiving a penalty as a result of that. Lewis was then just trying to hold on as best he could to the lead of the race, and it finished in a climax with Verstappen right up behind him, but ultimately Lewis doing a fantastic job in taking the win. Hi Sarah, thank you for your question which came via Twitter, and it was, how are we feeling? The roller coaster of emotions you feel during the course of a Grand Prix year are so difficult to explain and describe. They start all the way back in February when you have this embryo of a car that you're working with in testing. And as you go from race to race, you're basically, some races are this exhilaration, this huge outburst of joy when you win, and others just feel like you've been punched in the gut when you lose, and especially relative to an adversary such as Ferrari. And all of that builds up across the year. And when you get to a race like this one, where the Constructors' Championship's been decided, it's an outburst of energy that you have from within you. We were all shouting and just all of that emotion came out in one go. You have goosebumps on your hands, you feel almost a little bit detached from your body, and it is an incredible feeling, one that I've never felt anywhere else apart from when you've been doing this at this level in Grand Prix racing. So to answer your question, amazing. But we're also realistic, and tomorrow we've still got to go back to work because we want to do this again next year. Hi Ron, thanks for your question which came via Twitter, which was around Lewis's engine and will we have to take a penalty as a result of what happened in Brazil? If we just go back a little bit and go through a little bit what happened in the race, after the first pit stop with Lewis, we noticed quite a significant problem, and it required a huge amount of input from a number of sources. So we have a team back here in the UK, in Brixworth, that work alongside us, that are on the intercom, and we have a huge team trackside working together and diligently in order to understand what we can change on the engine in order to get towards the end of the race. They did a fantastic job, and it wasn't one change, it was a huge number of changes across a 40-50 lap period where they were working with Lewis in order to adjust various componentry to get that power unit to the end of the race. And they did a fantastic job. The net result of that, though, is the engine has sustained some level of damage, but we don't understand what, and it has to be inspected and understood before we can make any decision going forward to Abu Dhabi. Hi Thomas, thanks for your question which came via Instagram, and it was around what we did with Lewis strategically. Why didn't we go long like Verstappen did, or even maybe fit the soft tyre? The lap we came in was the first lap that Verstappen would have had some free air behind him. Magnussen had just dropped out what we call the pit window. So if Verstappen was to stop that lap, he would come out in free air with a good chunk of time before he caught Grosjean and be able to undercut us. We'd just stopped Valtteri the lap before, and Valtteri's outlap was very, very strong. So we knew that that medium tyre relative to our super soft was already much faster. The result of it was, do we brave it another few laps and hope that Red Bull are going long? Or do we take the decision now that we know that the medium's faster, we know the medium will make it to the end of the race, and therefore we keep a hold of that position? And we erred on that side. Lewis stopped, and indeed he was 0.8 faster immediately on that medium coming out the pit lane, and looked to be in good shape, pulling Verstappen back into his pit window in a safe region of 3 to 4 seconds. Lewis did a good job getting through Grosjean and again through Leclerc, but from that point onwards, as mentioned, he was struggling with a poorly PU. And we were really struggling to do everything on track that was required. Our race wasn't with Verstappen, it was with Ferrari that day, and we were trying to make sure that getting to the end of the race remained our main priority throughout all of that. And Lewis did a fantastic job. He raced Verstappen as hard as he could, but he was disadvantaged. When Verstappen came out on new softs, not just did he have a tyre advantage, but that wouldn't have been alone enough. We also had a poorly PU, and he wasn't able to defend in a straight line. Hi RMB44, thank you for your question which came via Twitter, and it was around why Red Bull seemed to be better than us, take the tyres longer than us, and why have we had issues over the last 3 races. So let me deal with those 2 things separately. The issues we had in Austin and the issues we had in Mexico were not related, and neither was related to the issue that we had in Brazil. All 3 are independent issues, working the tyres in different ways. We don't understand everything about why we were poor in Brazil relative to Red Bull, but Ferrari were equally poor. In fact, with Vettel, I would say worse than us. As we go forward, what we are doing as a team is we bring all of the data together, and we generate huge amounts of data from these racing cars now and try and understand all of the details that caused us to struggle or not, and build a picture for what we would like to try and change for Abu Dhabi and learn from our mistakes. The next part of that is Red Bull. Red Bull, why could they go longer than us? We could have gone longer with Lewis. We had a concern about being undercut relative to them, but we easily could have gone at least another 5 laps longer and maybe further again. My concerns aren't whether or not we could have gone longer or not. It's more that Red Bull were extremely impressive, certainly at the beginning of the race. They were siding through both Ferraris, Valtteri, and really all the way up to the back of Lewis at a point where we were all having to manage the tyres quite extraordinarily. That's where the Red Bull in Brazil was mighty. The next question is around Valtteri and why he seems to be a little bit offset relative to Lewis in the races. Valtteri had a very strong qualifying, putting him 3rd, and a really good start, getting in front of Vettel now, holding on to that 2nd position. And from then onwards, Valtteri knew that his job was to hold the Ferraris behind for the Constructors' Championship, and he did that fantastically. The Red Bulls were extraordinarily quick, but we already briefed him that's not where our race was that day. And where Verstappen was fighting aggressively against him, Valtteri did his utmost, but didn't have all of the tools you normally would in your arsenal on the power unit in order to defend. Valtteri's power unit had a problem in Mexico, and the result of that is the knock-on from that is that we have to be very careful about what we're doing. This championship is about not having DNFs. If we do have DNFs, it could compromise the constructors. Losing a position to the Red Bull won't. And that's what the target was, and Valtteri knew it. And he did a fantastic job given the amount of reduction in power tools that we normally would give him at his disposition. Hi T Wolf, thank you for your question which came via Instagram, and it was around how Shub's dancing was perceived from the pit wall. I mean, the starting point is this: 10 out of 10 for effort. He really put his heart and soul into it, and that you can tell. And samba dancing is all about passion. It's about bringing the emotion that you get inside the music out. It's about rhythm, it's about coordination. None of those were present. But as I said, the fact is he really gave it his all, and that we appreciate.
One of the very strong pillars. Pete, you're the calm part of the relationship.
Thank you very, very much again for all of your questions. We really do enjoy answering these. Please send in your questions for the final Grand Prix of the year, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and we'll do our utmost to answer those.